So let's look at the anatomy and physiology of speech production, and then we'll have another section on the A and P of hearing. We're going to treat them separately. Speech is caused by the movement of air. I'm going to change to blue here. Past the vocal cords. This air is forced past the vocal cords because of the diaphragm. Remember we talked about the diaphragm, that diaphragm makes that chest cavity get bigger or smaller. By increasing the volume, you decrease the pressure, and then vice versa. According to Boyle's law, this diaphragm can enlarge or shorten. The chest cavity, let me just remind you over here that PV, this is Boyle's law, that PV is equal to a constant value. And so if I make the volume go up, that means that the pressure goes down. And when the pressure inside of my lungs is small, the high pressure air from outside my lungs will rush in. So that would be an inhale. People generally breathe 12 to 15 times per second. Oh, I guess I don't need that. So 12 to 15 times per second when in normal activity. But of course, we saw the video of the freediver, and those freedivers can hold their breath for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes. So the human body is really remarkable, I think, when you think about what it can do and what we can do with it. Air moves from the lungs through the trachea, that's the windpipe. Of course, you'll need to know all of these anatomy. I'll probably give you a picture that will have different things labeled and you'll need to identify them. After that, it moves to the larynx. And this has the vocal cords. And we call this the Adam's apple. It's the thing that you can feel. So take your fingers and put them on your Adam's apple. And as you speak, you can feel the vibrations within that vocal box. Adam's apple. The vocal cords, which are also called the vocal folds, are inside the larynx. And this larynx protects and moves them with cartilage and muscles. The cords are actually muscles themselves. These vocal folds or vocal cords that can open or close depending on the situation. And the space between the cords is called the glottis. So if you're any speech therapist, you'll have classes, I think, where you just talk about the physics of sound and the physics of speech production. The glottis here is going to be the space in between the vocal folds. So this is called the glottis. And you can make different sounds depending on where your is your glottis open or closed, or where your cords open or closed. So if you're whispering, those cords are going to be open. If you're breathing, of course, they need to be open. And of course, whispering sounds a lot like breathing. Can you hear me whispering now? It sounds a lot like breathing. Speaking is a combination of being open or closed, depending upon the type of sound that you're making. A glottal stop is when you close the glottis. Oh, I'm sorry, a glottal stop is when you close the glottis. And this causes a particular sound. I have a video that I want to show you. A glottal stop is a technique that's used in music. And here I have a singer that describes the glottal stop and how that's used, particularly in pop and rock music. The frequency of the sound is given by this equation. It's one that we've seen already. That is that the frequency is equal to 1 over 2L times T, the square root of T over mu. And then let's not forget what these variables are. We've seen them already. L is the length of the string, or this is the frequency of a string under tension. T is the tension in that string, how much tension is there, and then mu is the mass density. For us, for human beings, this is a constant and that's also a constant. So really all that we can change is the tension, and if the tension goes up, that means that the frequency is going to go up as well. Not as much, mind you. So like for example, if I increase this by a factor of 4, the frequency only increases by a factor of 2 because it's a not a linear relationship. But a greater tension will give you a higher frequency. That's true, by the way, on guitars too, that's how you change the tuning of a guitar is by changing the tension. If you want to increase the frequency of the string, then you increase the tension for guitars and pianos and other stringed instruments. The length of the vocal cords also affects the frequency. While a particular person can't change the length of their vocal cords, different people do have different lengths of vocal cords. So men tend to have a larger larynx, just because they tend to be bigger than women, and longer vocal cords. So they tend to have a lower voice, a lower frequency for their voice, just because they have longer vocal cords. The amplitude of the sound is governed by the amount of air that flows past the cords. All right, so let's remember what Bernoulli's principle said. Bernoulli's effect says that if the velocity of a fluid goes up, the pressure of that fluid goes down. And we saw this in an airplane wing. This is a cutaway of an airplane wing. And imagine that I have two streams of air going over this airplane wing. One goes up top and one goes down below. Imagine that I have two particles of air here and here. This one has to travel a faster speed in order to get to this point as this one, which travels a shorter distance over the same amount of time. So up here I have a high velocity stream of air, and down here I have a low velocity stream of air. That means that I'm going to have a low pressure and a high pressure up here. So for an airplane wing then, that would give you because you have a high pressure on the bottom and a low pressure up top, will give you a lift. All right, so that's how airplanes work. It's also how the vocal cords work. So muscles bring the cords together. And air flowing pushes the cords apart. So I have these vocal cords that are together, and then you push air through them, and that forces them apart. The low pressure, if you imagine, these are my vocal cords. I have air coming out towards you through this little cavity, and so I have this high velocity stream of air coming through them. That's going to create a low pressure. And then those vocal cords, because they have a low pressure in between them, are going to come back together. So low pressure due to the Bernoulli effect causes them to come back together, and this low pressure oscillates, causing the vibration. I'll show you an example where I have two pieces of paper and you blow air through those two pieces of paper and they'll come together. But you have a similar effect when you're on the highway. Well, that's a terrible car. Try to draw a car here. This is a car. There's the wheels. And then imagine that I have a big 18-wheeler. When you try to pass an 18-wheeler, you have a similar effect that happens here. So next time you're on the interstate and you try to pass an 18-wheeler, sort of feel for it. You'll feel a slight tug that is pulling your car towards the 18-wheeler. Sometimes it's difficult to detect, but that is because I have a high velocity stream of air going in between these two vehicles, and that sort of pulls together the two vehicles. You can show it with pieces of paper like this or with vehicles, but those are the same thing that happens in your vocal cords, and that's due to the Bernoulli effect. The sound produced by vocal cords is also changed in a complex way by the mouth, throat, and nose. So the difference between men and women's voices, that is that men typically have lower voices, is also due to the fact that men have longer necks and bigger mouths and bigger noses. So it just makes a bigger cavity. It's like a tuba versus a piccolo. I think we'll see that in a little bit. All right, that's the end for that one. Sorry, it went a little long.